The project I'm going to do today, make this video on, is changing the serpentine belt in my Corolla. This is a pretty easy project to do. Anybody can do this. It's pretty straightforward. So the first thing I did is I went and bought, here's my Corolla. I went and bought a serpentine belt. So I ordered this one online. It looks like this. So I just looked up the part number for my car. And I like to play it safe and go with the actual Toyota brand stuff. So anyway, let's get under the hood and I'll show you where this thing goes in. Okay, here's the hood up, here's the engine in the car, and the belt's over here on the left side as you're looking at it. Let me turn this flashlight on, you can see it down there. Right up here in the corner you can see it, that's the alternator right there, and then you can see the belt goes down and connects to the other equipment. On this particular car, it's got this plastic cover over the engine. We'll have to take that off, it looks like. I actually don't see any fasteners on this, so this might just pop off. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Okay, so this would be the tension bolt, and I will admit I've never done this particular procedure on this car, but we'll figure it out. So if I look like I don't know what I'm doing, that's probably because I've never done it. Some cars have a spring-loaded tensioning system. This one has this bolt, looks like that's what sets the tension. So because it's not a spring-loaded tensioner, we're going to have to manually set the tension, and that can be a little tricky. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I've done this before, and it's not incredibly scientific, but it's a method. So let me show you. So one method we could use is to just record with the position of that bolt and return it to that same position. And I actually was going to use a dial caliper to do this, and I can't seem to find it, but I do have this thing. So this you can just adjust. So all I did is I just set this thing so I have the pretty precise width between there and there recorded. So I can always return it to that exact same width. What's actually better than that, because that assumes that the new belt has got the exact same tension as the old one, which is not necessarily the case. Another method, and I don't know that we're going to be able to see it on the screen here that good. Okay, I stuck a flashlight right here so you can see what I'm doing. So you can see, so I'm going to reach down here. So you see there's the belt. There, I'm touching it with my finger. You can kind of see where the flashlight's pointing at it. You can just kind of move it and see how much you can move it by hand. And you can usually move it about 90 degrees. You see how I'm turning it about 90 degrees? Well, that is pretty typical. So that's another way you can tension the new belt, is you can just get it to the tension to where you can move it by hand about that much. And it wouldn't hurt to feel of your existing belt before you pull it off and do a new one. That way you can put the tension back to be the same. Okay, so we'll just loosen this up. So you can see I've loosened this bolt, but nothing moved. And usually that's because there's a lock bolt somewhere else, so there's usually one or two other lock bolts that once you get the tension set with this bolt, then you tighten down a lock bolt. So let's find that. Looks like in our case it is this bolt right under here. You see that bolt right there? That's going to be at least we'll loosen that one and see if it gets free, but that's probably the lock bolt. Alright, that bolt's loose and it's still not moving, so there must be something else. So right below the alternator, there's a bolt. You can see it right there. It looks like it's kind of at the pivot point. It's right on the bottom of the alternator, and it is kind of the pivot bolt where when it is free, that's where it's going to rotate. Okay, so that is a 12mm bolt down there at the bottom. And we're going to need some leverage to break it loose, so I've got an extender here. So I'm going to get my socket wrench on it with a deep socket there. So if you've never come up with something like this to give you more leverage, I would do it. It's really handy because in cases like that, you really couldn't get enough leverage down there to break that loose. So you can see it's this thing will move now, and we could loosen this some more here so it could go even further. But I've loosened this bolt even more, so you can see this alternator can clearly move now. Yeah, well, so you see that it's very loose. So the tension's off of the belt, and we can get the belt loose now very easily, just like that. So I pulled off that old belt. Here it is right here. This belt has got about 120,000 miles on it, so I don't know how well that'll show up on the camera, but it does look pretty rough. It has definitely seen better days. So one of the other things you always want to do with the belt is you want to take your new belt and you know, put them side by side and stretch them out and just make sure they're the same length. Keep in mind that the old belt will have stretched just a little bit, but this is a good way to check and make sure the parts store gave you the right belt. And then pulling that old belt off is super easy. Putting the new belt on is never that easy because you got to get it just right around all the pulleys. I also looked at the routing of it to make sure I can repeat it. This one's simple. I've seen some cars with a serpentine belt. It's very complicated, so be sure and look at it so you can route it back the same way. Some cars actually have little diagrams to show you that. I don't think this one does, probably because it's so simple. So the new belt is on there but loose, so it has to go all the way to the bottom. If you really struggle with this, you could always get to that bottom from underneath the car. See that pulley at the very bottom? Then there's one further back. I don't know if it's going to show up. It's further back there in the back. This actually went on incredibly easy, almost too easy. So now we'll tighten this bolt up, which will put tension on it, and we'll see how much tension we want to put on it. And like I said, you can see it's very loose right now. You see I'm moving that. Okay, so I tightened it up. I almost put it right back where it was. I tightened it, then I felt of it a few times, and it's a tough thing to feel through. I think it felt close to what it was before, and the bolt's almost back where it was. It's slightly not as far in, so this belt is a little bit looser, but it's probably because it's new and the other one was old and it stretched some. So anyway, the last thing to do is to tighten up those two lock bolts, and we'll do that, and then we'll be all done. Okay, last but not least, feel that one more time, make sure it feels good. I also did another look with the flashlight to make sure the belt was on the pulleys exactly right after it was tightened down. And then we'll just have to line up this thing and get it snapped back in. I know I'm usually, when I work on cars, I'm usually a stickler about using the correct torques, and I did not look up the torques for these. I just tightened those bolts just by feel. You could look up the torques if you wanted to do it a little more precise on those two lock bolts. That way you could get those just right. I didn't do that this time, but I've done enough of these bolts. I know I felt pretty good about it. So anyway, this was an easy job. Not all Serpentine belts are this easy, but on this 2012 Corolla, it was pretty easy. Of course, you want to start the engine up and listen to it and make sure you don't hear any noises, squealing noises, usually if the belt's slipping or something like that, or a roaring noise if it may be too tight and it's damaging one of the components that's spinning. So thanks for watching my video. Hope it was useful to you. Like and subscribe my channel, and have a good one. I'll see you guys next time.